log on and get situated, grab your lunch or a coffee, depending what coast you might be on. Hope everyone's having a great day so far. We're very excited. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, I think we can probably get started. Welcome everyone to Quiet Light's September AMA featuring Paul Andersen, who's going to tell us all about how he bought and sold his online business for 7 figures. My name is Sam. I'll be moderating and facilitating this conversation. I have a lot of questions. I hope you have a lot of questions. I would rather get yours answered than mine. So if you have a question at the bottom, you'll see that Q&A chat box. That's the best place to enter them so we can make sure we're getting to everybody in order that they're coming in. If you prefer to answer them audibly, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we can get your question that way. Or you can enter them into the chat, but the most effective way is that Q&A chat box. So we'll be monitoring that the entire hour. Okay, for those of you who don't know much about Quiet Light, let me give you a quick rundown. Quiet Light is an entrepreneur-led and focused company. They have been helping entrepreneurs just like all of you buy, build, and sell online businesses since 2006. So quite a number of years of experience. My favorite part about this company is that everyone that's advising has bought, built, or sold an online business themselves. So they're coming with real experience, real relatable insight to help all of you through that process as well. We also do a lot of educational work. That's a huge part of what we do. So think blogs, podcasts, webinars, AMAs like this, articles, etc. And we keep all of that on quietlight.com. So if after this you're still thirsty for more content, head over there, and there's maybe too much content there. We've got a lot going on. Okay, now to our guest of honor, Paul Andersen. Welcome, Paul. Good morning. Paul is an entrepreneur, obviously himself. He's been in the game for a while. He's got some deep FBA, Amazon FBA experience, specifically with physical product businesses, but probably at this point, he can speak to all sorts of industries. He's built multiple multi-million-dollar businesses over the past however many years. Most recently has sold and exited his online e-commerce business for 7 figures in 2019, which is what we're all here to pick his brain about. And so before all of that, Paul was a CPA working in some corporate finance work. And when he's not doing all that work stuff, he's got a couple kids he's chasing around alongside his wife. And sometimes they all play some pickleball. Paul, anything that I've missed that you think the world should know about you?
No, great intro. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks for the intro. One slight correction. I didn't buy my business. I started my business from very humble beginnings. So I think you mentioned I bought and then sold it, but I actually started. So minor detail there, but yeah, excited to jump in. Hopefully I can answer some questions, provide some value. And we have a good hour together here. Maybe before we jump in, I think, Sam, you might have a poll queued up. I'm just really curious to get a sense of the crowd here. Are you more interested in buying a business? Are you more interested in selling? Or looks like we got another option, scaling. That would be helpful just to see who's in the mix here today, and we can try to make sure we're answering for everybody. So take a second and just populate that poll if you would.
Yeah, sorry about that, Paul. I think I just totally misspoke. I listened to your podcast as well. It's a fascinating story.
Oh yeah, no, all good. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for the good intro. I don't know if I can see the results of this poll. Are we still waiting? Are we good?
I think it's still live.
We're going.
Yeah, it's live. So go ahead and yeah, just kind of get rolling a little bit. I think there's a lot of buy side interest. I think just kind of valuations speak to both sides of the deal. So I think with kind of like a buy side mentality, really good to know. But I think I think especially in terms of like your deal, Paul, and like how it created value, and how you created value for that. I mean, for me, it was a great exit because buyer and seller were happy, and that's what we really want to generate. So yeah, I would just talk, maybe skew a little bit buy side, but I think both sides of this sale are really interesting.
Great,
Okay,
cool.
well, let's take a step back because I have to ask, how did you even get into this endeavor?
Yeah, I mean, so I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, there were some of those seeds there even as a kid, whether it's mowing lawns or trading baseball cards. Like I think I always had that kind of interest bubbling, but then grow up, get older. I took a very, I guess, safe path. I'm hearing some like background noise. Are you hearing that, Sam? Or are you good?
I'm not, but let me try going on mute just in case it's.
Oh, cool. Yeah, now I'm not hearing anything. Awesome. Yeah, so kind of those entrepreneurial spirit as a kid, but then grow up, go to college, kind of take the safe path, and I ended up studying accounting, getting my CPA. And while I spent like 10 years in that life, honestly, a lot of it I was just kind of floating along with inertia just carrying me. And somewhere along the line, I'm like, all right, what race am I actually running here? What am I trying to do? And I didn't really have a clear answer for that. And I was really kind of running, sort of cliche, but it was like running someone else's race and not my own. So I was spending a lot of time at this job. I didn't really love it. I wasn't really accumulating a whole lot of, wealth. So I took a step back. Somewhere along the line, I came across Amazon, and Amazon is incredible for people in that space because with one person you can scale a huge business, multi-million-dollar business. So I learned everything about that and said, this could be kind of reverse engineer a way that this could lead to a stronger outcome where I can actually, what I was really seeking was freedom. Like, hey, I want to have kids, be with my kids, do work that I find interesting. So I started really humble on Amazon in 2015 or 2016. I started with $5,000, which was like, is a lot, but at that time it was felt like a really big deal to put $5,000 and send it off to China to buy some products from someone I'm talking to on WeChat. I had a logo designed on Fiverr that literally cost $5 and used that as my logo. And I started kind of not knowing a lot of things, but I'd listened to a ton of podcasts and in Facebook groups, done as much kind of homework as I could, to try to give myself a shot. And that was kind of the start. And, long story short, I had a couple fails, but I kept going and ended up having like the biggest brand in my particular category on Amazon, grew to a couple million in sales, had a 7-figure exit. And it was just, I still kind of pinched myself, but it all kind of worked out that way. So that's the short version of the story.
Great. That's awesome. Just to go back to some of your fails, would you say you completely pivoted after those? Were you just iterating on things that went wrong? Or was it like, okay, this didn't work, I'm going to try something totally different?
I mean, a little bit of both. So much on Amazon is like picking the right product. You can be like the world's greatest Amazon seller and be operationally excellent, but if you don't pick the right, space to play in, you're going to have a really hard time. So that took me a little while to kind of get that piece down. I think if you take enough, swings at the bat and give it a go, and then you refine your criteria along the way, eventually you're going to hit something. So that's what happened for me. There was some fails in picking the wrong products. There was also major fails just with, I didn't know how to interact with China. Half my products broke on the first shipment because, things I should have foreseen. So there's all these little operational things that you pick up along the way as well. So it was a bit of both.
Got it. And just a friendly reminder, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A chat box. You'll hear me say this a few times in the next hour, or you can raise your hand if you would prefer to ask them audibly. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled programming. So Paul, in terms of once you kind of found that the business that was clear, that was going to be the one that's going to take you to the finish line, within that process, as you got closer and closer to thinking about buying, how did your thought process change? What made you go from, okay, I'm just building this business to, hey, I think I could maybe sell this and exit?
Yeah, good question. I mean, honestly, when I started, I didn't really even think you could sell an Amazon business. I mean, so it wasn't really that the intention from the start, but really it was reverse engineering it. So figuring out, hey, if I want to get this exit, I mean, my big goal was financial independence and freedom. And so I was like trying to hit a certain number on the exit, right? So I talked to Joe Valley, one of our owners at Quiet Light, maybe a year or 18 months before the exit to say, what are buyers looking for? What can I do to make sure my business is sellable? What sort of multiples should I expect? That way I could kind of back into like, hey, if I want to have $1 million exit and an Amazon business trades at a 3 multiple, like I need to get to, 330K of annual profit. So it was really kind of starting to like pivot my mindset from like, what do I need to do to set this up and make it attractive for a buyer? And then where's kind of the point I need to get the business at where I'm going to be really happy with the exit financially.
Great. And you just mentioned this, and I had meant to mention this in your intro that Quiet Light actually brokered this deal, and now you're on the Quiet Light side, which I just think is very cool. And so obviously in that process, you reached out to a consultant or an advisor to work with. How valuable was, I mean, obviously you found it valuable, but do you think that what were the things about it that you didn't expect that were like, oh, I'm really glad that I worked with a consultant versus just reading a lot and trying to do it by myself?
Yeah, it's I talked to Quiet Light. I didn't know all the players in the space when I was starting this process, so I kind of talked to everybody. And I'm here at Quiet Light now. I wouldn't work at any other spot. Like I get, I'm really not like a sales forward person. I have like an aversion to kind of the used car thing. And like when you think like a broker and selling something, Quiet Light just feels totally different than that, which is what really resonated with me when I talked to Joe and the team here. Yeah, I mean, as far like, I think the question is like, go with an advisor or broker or not. And I think there's like no necessarily like right or wrong answer. It's up to each person is how they see fit. I think a good advisor adds a lot of value. I mean, number one, you're going to have a competitive process. Like there's no way I, as an individual seller, could have tracked down all the potential buyers of my business. I just didn't have them in my network. And even today, where aggregators are doing more outreach and, there's headlines in the news, you can reach out. I mean, we've got, I don't know, I'm talking Amazon here, like 100 aggregators in our network that we talk to. For me or an individual seller to know who they all are, know kind of the nuances of them, and then run a process that's competitive, like it's just really difficult, and the best outcomes come in those competitive processes. So one is just like, I think you can get to a better outcome. But then the other thing is, I mean, when I went through the process, like Joe was honestly like, he helped me like make sure my books were clean, do some like blocking and tackling stuff. But also it's kind of an emotional process, and to have someone that's an advocate and with you each step of the way, helping you, say this is normal, this isn't normal, these are market terms, these are not market terms. Most people have never sold a business, so this isn't something you've like, really developed this muscle before. So I think having someone there to guide you through it is really valuable. In addition to like your outcome can be better as well. So, that's what I would say on that front.
That's great. We do have a question in the chat. So I'll share that with you now. We think of sellers as being at the mercy of buyers, but would you agree with that? What do you look for in a buyer?
I think of sellers are at the mercy of buyers. What do you look for in a buyer? Yeah, I think that is like a lot of sellers go into the process, honestly, with kind of like some fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like, have I built this thing? Is anyone going to want it? Is something going to go bump along the way? And they're going to find something I don't know about. So like you kind of enter with fear to a certain degree. I think it's changing right now because people have realized, whether it's Amazon or general e-commerce or content or SaaS for sure, like these are real businesses with real value, and there's more dollars and more sophisticated people, that have been entering in the space in recent years. So I think buyers can start to feel, not cocky or arrogant, but feel confident and feel good if they've built a high quality business that someone's going to want. But as far as buyers, I mean, the biggest thing, like when I was a seller, and a lot of sellers, like you don't just want to get an offer, you want to actually close the finish line. I think that cross the finish line, I think the scariest thing for a lot of buyers is like, I'm going to go under contract with someone. I'm going to therefore kind of shut down any other potential buyers. And we're going to enter this relationship, go through diligence and negotiate a purchase agreement. And the more a buyer can demonstrate confidence that like, hey, we want to cross the finish line. We understand you. We understand your business. You know, we can inspire confidence that we're going to be good stewards of your business after ownership. We're going to, you know, of course, we're going to do our work and due diligence, but and ask tough questions, but we're going to be fair and reasonable and work through things as they come up. So the more a buyer can kind of inspire that confidence, I think the better. You know, because if you had two offers that looked exactly the same, like one that had that posture, I think would 100% win the deal versus someone that did the opposite, of course.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting that it can be more of a collaboration than sort of a transaction, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, I mean, when you go under, it's like really a partnership. As you go, you're going to be working with this person or this group very closely. So you want to kind of have, you know, good chemistry and good vibes and like, get through the process. It's fun to make an offer. It's fun to accept an offer, but then, you know, you're not going to close the deal for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. So you want to really, you know, have a good collaboration and partnership throughout the process.
Yeah, you mentioned that transition from when you sort of start to hone in on who your buyer is going to be and then the process of closing and then afterwards. Can you speak a little to that transition? Were you working more? Were you working less? Once you sort of crossed the dotted line, like how long were you still partnering with the buyer until you were really, you know, severed from the business?
Yeah, so I was really lucky on my business. I had like, I don't remember how many offers, eight offers or 10 offers or something. Like it was really overwhelming, the amount of offers and how many qualified, you know, cool people I met through that process. Like the two thing, of course, like the number and the money is very important for any seller, but what kind of allowed the group and the person to stand out that was the eventual buyer was that they really inspired a lot of confidence that they would close the transaction, number one, because they'd closed other transactions in the past, and that they really knew I didn't want to handhold and like be super involved for a long time after. And they were very sharp and like demonstrated, you know, very clearly that they would like hit the ground running day one. So that was kind of a key consideration. Other sellers might, you know, want to spend more time and like really help with the nitty-gritty transition. So for me, the transition was really smooth. The buyers jumped in, they did a great job from the start, and it was, you know, kind of what I was hypothesizing of the reasons I wanted to pick them like came true, which was great.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's the dream come true. That's what you want. So, I mean, I'm sure it sounds like for you, which is great, a lot of the experience was very smooth and went well. Is there anything that looking back, you know, you would have done differently within that transaction process, or something that didn't go so well that other people might find, you know, they should be ready to anticipate in terms of a struggle that they could hit?
I mean, in running the business, there's a million hurdles and different things that happen. Like, but I think your question is more like around the exit. I think, you know, I was in really good hands with Joe and Quiet Light. So like, there wasn't any like big misses or anything. I think like the biggest thing is when you sell a business, it sounds very obvious. Like you want to build something that someone wants to buy. And the more you can do that, like the more you can de-risk it, the more you can have growth opportunities, the cleaner your financials are. You know, the more collaborative and helpful you can be kind of through the process, like the better. So, you know, there wasn't any big things that went bump. I guess the biggest thing was just psychologically, like I was like just nervous, I guess, because it was such like a big amount, you know, a life-changing amount of money for me and my family. And I just didn't know, like, I just had a hard time. Like diligence gets kind of nerve-wracking as a seller. Like, hey, you're asking all these detailed questions. Like, should I be reading into this that you've got, you know, concerns about the business or whatever else? So I think if I did it over again, I would just be a little more self-assured and a little more understanding of the process. And I think there's a lot of sellers I work with that are like that. It's really easy to get nervous, let your imagination go different places. But yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing, just the psychology of going through an exit.
Yeah, and just because you've touched on it, and this is sort of a paraphrase question from the chat as well. Can you speak to life after your big deal and your exit? Obviously, you're still involved in the industry. You've joined the Quiet Light team, but for you, how has it sort of changed your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you always hear people say like, what changed? It's like, oh, it was no big deal, whatever. Like, it was awesome in a lot of ways. Like, like it doesn't fix, of course, it doesn't fix, problems. If you got problems, like you still, the core of your relationships is not going to change. But it took off so much pressure, I think, financially, and allowed me to feel like I have the freedom to kind of take a breath, work on what I want to work on. So that was kind of the biggest thing. And yeah, from there I've been doing other e-commerce pursuits. I've been really thrilled to be part of the awesome team at Quiet Light. So it just takes like a little bit of the money pressure off, which is like a big pressure and a stressor in, I think, a lot of people's lives. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what I say.
Of the whole process from start to finish, good or bad, what was just the biggest surprise? Like the one thing that you were like, I did not expect this to happen, or this to be something I have to deal with, or this to be a line I have to cross, or, whatever.
You're talking on the exit process or just like in general?
Sure. It was sort of in general, but if you have something specific as a process, that's great too.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of surprises throughout. It's like, I'm still surprised, like entrepreneurship and e-commerce is such a wild thing with such asymmetric upside. I mean, I'm still shocked that like I started out with $5,000 and that $5,000, turned into a lot more than $5,000. Like, it's just shocking. And like the team was me. It was me and my $299 Chromebook, like sitting in my house building this thing. It just it feels really, really weird. So I think like that was just a surprise. And I mean, obviously I've met tons of fantastic entrepreneurs that have done, way bigger and better things than that. So that was a surprise. And two, I think like it's just, there's so much great information out there, whether it's on Quiet Light's website has a ton of great stuff, and in Facebook groups and Reddit, and like you don't have to know everything at the start. I think my old view of entrepreneurship was like, I need to know everything and like draw a business plan and, have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, but like you really can like start and then just keep like iterating, learning, meeting people, looking online for resources. Like a lot of it is all right there. It's just a whole lot of perseverance throughout to get to the other side.
Okay, we have another question for you. In terms of seller's discretionary earnings, what is the difference about a 7-figure business? Is your due diligence different? Or as a buyer, are the financing options the same? So maybe start with, for anyone who isn't as familiar with what seller's discretionary earnings is, and then I can repeat some of the facets of this question.
Yeah, seller's discretionary earnings is essentially the profit of your business adjusted for taking profit and then adjusting what we call add backs to get to SDE. Really, the point of it is to try to show what's the total monetary benefit to me as an owner. So if I have, $100,000 in my bottom line, but I paid myself a $50,000 salary, actually my total, economic benefit is $150,000. So that's what SDE is. And then I think the question was that at $1 million, how do things change, or what's the multiple of $1 million, or remind me, Sam, what the question was?
Yeah. What's different about a 7-figure business? Is it the due diligence? Is it, are financing options the same? Was sort of the 3-part question. But yeah, I think ultimately what this question is getting at, whoever asked, you can type if I'm getting it wrong. What makes this deal different than, or process different than a 6-figure, 5-figure, 8-figure type of transaction?
Yeah, I'd say once you hit like the $1 million, $2 million SDE range, there's a couple differences. One is the multiples go up. You know, bigger pools of capital like are generally not going to come down and look at $150,000 SDE businesses, but as you get into million, 2 million plus, then that kind of opens things up to kind of a different pool of capital, and the multiples tend to be higher. And if you got $1 million or 2 million of SDE, then you probably have a little more durability and track record than a smaller business, which might be a little more volatile. So I think one big thing is multiples go up. If you're on a smaller business, you might have a mom and pop buyer that might be their first ever acquisition. So diligence is going to look different there than $1 million plus. It's going to be a more sophisticated buyer. So it doesn't necessarily mean diligence is, a lot tougher or materially different, but there's more of like a process and, questions that are ready to roll and certain things that buyer is going to be looking for. So diligence does look a bit different as well. Financing, I mean, I guess not that different. It really depends on who the buyer is. Like on sub $1 million deals, there's a lot of SBA buyers. On those bigger deals, there's a lot of groups that have raised capital that have the cash to actually execute that transaction. So it can be a bit different on financing as well.
Great. Super helpful. And then I guess speaking a little bit too, because now you have this experience and obviously all the partners and sellers that you work with over at Quiet Light, would you say like, if you have a business and you want to hit a 6-figure deal, a 7-figure, 8-figure deal, but you're not quite there yet, is there a clear path to that? Or would that be something that's like, this business is capped at what we've valued it at? Like, how can people add value if they want to hit that 7-figure mark?
Yeah, I mean, there's no like, global answer I can give to say, basically the answer is like grow your SDE, grow your profit. So you can sort of do simple math to back into where you want to get. Like I said, if you're trying to get to $1 million exit, you probably need 250 to 300 some $1,000s of profit. So if you're only at 175, then you know what you need to do to bridge the gap numbers wise. I mean, the tactics that you need to get there, that's really on the entrepreneur, whether that's adding new products or doing more advertising or tightening up advertising or expanding to different markets. That's a question that on a specific situation could say more about it, but it's hard kind of globally to say, and it's really up to you as an entrepreneur to figure out how do I go from where I am to where I need to be. But kind of the math exercise is fairly simple to know. If you get a sense for multiples in your space, which anyone curious, please feel free to reach out and we can connect on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like this is a perfect example of why, even if you're remotely thinking about going down this path, working with a consultant or just to ask questions. I mean, never mind any sort of formal process, but just to get the ball rolling and start to get some of the answers to questions that you might have. So here's another question from the chat. Lots of questions from the chat. Love this. I read about how aggregators are scooping up all of the Amazon businesses. How can I stand out as a buyer?
I think it's a similar question as I answered before. I mean,
yeah, it's a bit similar, but if you've got any other nuances to add.
Yeah. So I guess it depends. Like if, maybe it doesn't depend that much, but the question's spot on. There's so many aggregators. And it's, if I was an aggregator, I'd be thinking, how can I differentiate myself? So I guess, again, I think the main rule is show that you can close the transaction, show that you understand the seller, you understand their business, that you have competence to actually execute once you've, a lot of these deals have an earnout. So in a situation where I'm a seller and I'm taking an earnout, I'm really placing a bet on you as an operator. So I want to feel confident that you're going to operate the business well. So that's one piece. And then I think some degree of specialization will be important, because if you're kind of just, I do anything, I do everything, I do, deal sizes from low to high, like that doesn't really give you a unique kind of position or point of view in the market. But if you're like, hey, I really know the supplement space, I know the ins and outs of it, I know the the regulatory side, I understand the supply chain, like having kind of some subject matter expertise, I think would differentiate you, versus more of a generalist approach. So it's a good question. I don't know if there's a, one size fits all easy answer that I have, but hopefully those are helpful things to think about.
Yeah, I think the beauty and the curse of this world is that there isn't really ever a one size fits all answer, because everything is so unique. I want to take you back in time for 1 second to touch on a question that was asked that I might have missed earlier in the chat. But in terms of when you first started, how long would you say you were double teaming both your day job and then this side hustle, which eventually became your main gig? But how long did that process for you take before you were willing to say, it's time?
It was about a year and a half. I was really like uncertain, like, all right, is this Amazon thing for real? Is what I'm building durable? So I didn't want to really like take the plunge until the business was, a decent size. But yeah, it's kind of weird having your foot in two different spaces. I still think it's right for people starting out. Like, we all are optimistic and we all want to have a great, build a great business, have a great exit. But I'd be a little nervous, like quitting a, secure job just to start kind of at zero. So I think it's probably a different comfort zone for everybody, but somewhere along the line, I'm like, all right, now I'm just too busy with this job, the side job, which is now, I'm growing and growing. And there was sort of like a natural point where it felt right. But I think it was about 18 months into the journey.
Enough time to really commit and make sure that this is something you can get your feet on the ground with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, at the point that I left my day job, I felt like this is a real business now and I need to like treat it as such. And, so it just felt like the right move. And like the upside high, like I could have done something at my day job. I mean, the beauty of entrepreneurship, it's like I could have saved the company millions of dollars or, grown the company by millions of dollars. And like, I probably would have gotten like a few Starbucks gift cards, maybe a nice plaque or something. But like on my own business, if I can like grow it, like those benefits accrue to me, which like was just more compelling to me at the time. So yeah, so it just felt like the right time.
I love that side by side comparison. It's so relatable. Yeah, you're in control of your own destiny.
Yeah,
that sounds.
Yeah, you want to work for your bottom line or someone else's bottom line, and there's like pros and cons to each, because when you work for just your own bottom line, if things don't go the way you plan, then you don't really have that safety net there. So yeah, it's such a personal decision.
Well, just while we're on the topic of your origin story, if you will, what kind of research did you do to decide this is the product or the industry that I want to pursue? Like, was that something that it came to you? Did you do a lot of research ahead of time? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was really, there wasn't any like hard and fast science behind it, but everything I launched, I was trying to launch products that were like in a fast growing niche. So like my first product was this coffee stand, because I had like been reading about how there's all these people that are really like nerding out on doing, these special kind of brews at their house to make cool coffee. So that seemed like a really big growth area, but it hadn't really been developed yet on Amazon. So I started that. That was the product that literally half of the things broke on the container ship. So that was a bummer. Some other ones, the same sort of thing. And then ultimately, so my business was in the pickleball space, which is a really fun sport. If no one's ever checked it out or played it. But it was kind of serendipitous. Like I had learned all this stuff about Amazon, but I just was like, I don't quite have a product. And I was visiting my parents in Arizona, and they were like, hey, have you heard of this sport, pickleball? Like from 6 a.m. to sunset, like people are down here playing pickleball. I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I looked into it and it's like, oh, this is America's fastest growing sport. And it wasn't really, now it's very built out on Amazon, but at the time it really wasn't. So it kind of met the intersection of like, seems like this is going to be a thing and there's not that many people doing it on Amazon yet. And that was really the sweet spot that I was always looking for in products to launch. It's a hard sweet spot to find, especially now in 2021 versus 2015, 2016. It's, vastly more competitive. But that was kind of my lens of how I try to analyze things.
That's great. That closes the loop on the Easter egg that I put into your intro of that your family sometimes plays some pickleball here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So one question we have in the chat, we've sort of danced around this a little bit, I think, but I'm not sure we've really hit it on the head. So when exactly is the optimal time to sell? And obviously that's, as you've mentioned, unique and different to each buyer, or seller and where they are in their process. But maybe from your experience, how did you really decide, okay, like this is the right time and here I want it to take this much time? Like we've talked a little bit about it, but if you can give us some more detail on the when of the process, that'd be great.
Yeah. The first thing is it is super personal and like what your particular goals are, as far as an outcome, like if, so that's, I think, kind of like the overriding thing, but then, which isn't a very satisfying answer for people listening probably. But the other pieces though are just like, growth is a big piece. So if you put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, they really want to buy a business that's been on a nice growth trajectory, but still has growth left and real growth opportunities. So when you've got the business kind of humming along, it's growing nicely, there's still some growth ahead. That's a thing to think about. You want, like I said before, it's obvious, but buyers, you want to build a business that people want to buy, right? So that means like once you professionalize your business, you might have a third-party bookkeeper doing the financials. If you've got little quirks in your supply chain, like you've ironed all those things out. So it's, a buyer is going to understand what's going on. If you're spending 80 hours a week on the business, like a lot of buyers are not going to want to work in the business the way you have. So that means, maybe you've now hired a VA and kind of backed yourself out of it. So I think it's sort of a combination of like your personal, do you have a lot more energy for this, or are you starting to feel burnt out? Financially, is the exit, align with what your goals are? And then there's those other kind of more professionalized things, accounting, de-risking the business, supply chain, growth opportunities. When you have those things, it's never going to be perfect. These are, it's a messy world and it's small online businesses, but when you get those things in a nice spot, that's a time that you can definitely think about selling.
One thing that I love that you touch on, Paul, sometimes even before the finances and the numbers, is like the feeling and the emotional side, which I think a lot of people don't think about at all, but I imagine it's a huge aspect of this whole process. And I just wanted to call that out. I think that's really important that people are hearing that from you, because that's like probably, I mean, percentage wise, that probably takes up how much of your mind space in this entire endeavor.
You mean as a seller, or for me, like working with sellers?
Oh, just when you were in the selling process.
Oh, yeah.
You do both if you want.
Yeah, I mean, it takes up a fair amount because, if you're lucky, you get one exit in your life, maybe two or three if you're just a really, talented entrepreneur. So when you go through it, it's a big deal. It's maybe a once in a lifetime thing, and you're not going to get another outcome like this. You want to maximize it. And when you haven't been through something, so things are a bit unknown for you, haven't ever walked this path before. And oh, by the way, there's a sizable, wire that could be incoming to your bank account. Like it's just like, it stirs up emotions for sure. So I think it's really normal and just part of the process. I don't know percentage wise how much it took up. It's just kind of like kind of under the surface the whole time is just this sort of feeling as you're going through the exit.
Yeah. And speaking of not the softer side of things, but maybe more creative is a better word. obviously the numbers and building revenue is very important. In terms of the marketing side or the branding side, you mentioned a $5 logo at one point. How much of your time and energy was spent into building the brand itself versus just, the business? Like separating basically, growing sales versus making sure that your brand is at the forefront on Amazon.
Yeah, I think, honestly on Amazon, I'm sure people would disagree with me, but like brand is not that important in a lot of cases. So like, if I'm selling shoes and I'm trying to compete with Nike or Reebok or something, like, all right, maybe I need to have a really strong brand and need to, make sure people know who I am. But so much of success on Amazon is your reviews, where you show up in search, your price point, just being in stock, which has been crazy for a lot of sellers recently. So brand, you want to look professional, you want to look nice. But it was not something I spent a ton of time on. I mean, I had like these grand ambitions, like grow the brand and get out there and do all these things and make it a well-known brand. But, I think there's other things that are more critical to success at the start. And I'm sure people would, classically trained marketing people would be upset by the answer, but at least on Amazon, I think a lot of e-commerce with Facebook ads, whatever else, brand's important. Like you got to have a certain look and feel to it, but there's a lot of other factors I think that kind of stack ahead of that in terms of winning in the marketplace.
Well, I think that's a good point, because you think about if you're going to build a brand and be independent, that's very important, but you're selling under a big brand already, Amazon. And so however much branding you can put into that is helpful, but most people will go around and say, oh, I bought this from Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you search for, coffee cup and it shows up at the top, it's got great reviews and it seems priced well, like you're probably not going to be like, what is the origin story of this brand? And let me, check out their Instagram feed. And I mean, you might, and it would be nice to have all those things there, but like most people I think are just like, it's $9.99, it's got 5,000 great reviews, like add to cart, purchase, done. So, getting to the top of search and getting your price point right, those are all complex, difficult things. But I think that's kind of where the game is won and lost more so than the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think about my own Amazon purchases and how many times I look at the actual seller, and it's far and few between.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think now it's like 60% of, Amazon third-party sellers have been just dominating even Amazon. I think 60% of sales are from third-party sellers, small business owners. So, that have created all these little unique brands and products and niches. So yeah, I agree. I don't look much at the seller or the brand story or anything else.
And just because you mentioned the stock issues that I think a lot of sellers or online business owners are probably experiencing now, and even when you were in your process of selling, you mentioned that you had some issues with shipping and things like that. From the stocking perspective, is there any advice you can give to folks about how to plan ahead, or things like what to expect that you wouldn't expecting the unexpected, excuse me, the better way of phrasing that, in terms of that angle of the process?
Yeah, it's like such a simple concept, but it's really complex and messy and not a glamorous side of the business, but it's so important. If you don't have stock, you're disappeared off of Amazon. You don't exist. Your competitors are getting all those sales and building up their rank, and you're just sitting there idly by. So, what I did, I always had a spreadsheet where I track my sales and track days of supply and understand my lead times. I'd be in close contact with my supplier. So I think a lot of it is just those blocking and tackling things, but when you're in growth mode, sometimes you underestimate how fast you can grow, and all of a sudden your assumptions go out the window. And it's like, I'm making a decision right now. If I tell you, Sam, my supplier, I need 1,000 coffee mugs, like it's going to take you 30 or 40 days to make them. It's going to take 30 or 40 days to get it on the water. My business could look way different in 60 days or 90 days when that shipment arrives. So I think like the biggest thing is try to build as much cushion as you can and just, err on the side of more inventory versus less. But that has its downfall too. Like you're tying up a bunch of cash. And when you're in growth mode, you don't have a lot of cash. you're putting it all back into inventory. So just be sitting on all this inventory is not ideal, but there's no silver bullet. You do the best you can. You stay organized, build a spreadsheet, try to make the best assumptions you can. But I mean, any seller I've talked to, it's just kind of part of this ball game is dealing with inventory. And now it's, like you said, crazier than ever. I don't envy people that are, especially coming into Q4 and the holidays. It's going to be nutty.
A question just popped in related to this. How important would you say relationships with suppliers are? So how much time did you invest in, I'm assuming this is what this is getting at, building a relationship with your suppliers? How often did you speak to them? Did you go visit them, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important. I went to China and visited my supplier. It's very important because, like, your supplier has a lot of they're serving multiple different customers. So you want to kind of be top of mind and if things are in a pinch and you need some product, that they can get that done for you and kind of put you to the front of the line, so to speak. If you have a good relationship, that's possible. And also just on the quality side of things, it's really key I was always talking to my supplier about, hey, here's the feedback I'm seeing in reviews or in emails. Can we tweak this? Can we tweak that? Like, annoying stuff, but all these little things start to add up. So the better you can kind of translate, like, hey, the more we can fix these things, the better reviews I'm going to have, the happier my customers are going to be. That's going to kind of get this flywheel spinning faster. Then I'll be, selling more things, buying more things from you. So we're going to all win together. So I think it's really key to develop that relationship. On the going through the exit, it's important too, just that you can speak to that relationship, that your supplier is professional, that, kind of understand what other products they might have to offer, talk through product quality and, any journey you've been on there. So I think it doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but it is important both in building the business and in the exit as well.
Yeah, I think that's remarkable. And I would imagine pretty rare that you actually went over and met with them in person. Or maybe that is more common. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the size of your business. When you're in early stage, not as common. And then as you start to grow more and more, I think it's more important, but it really goes a long way. Like, you'll learn, the relationship will become stronger for sure. Especially going to China, like, my sense was just culturally that was really valued, that to go over, spend the time, have meals together, talk about life and business. So I think that was really key to solidify the relationship. So yeah, I would recommend it. And you just learn a ton, like, oh, this is how you do this and this is how you do that. Like, can we do this? Can we do that? You can kind of like brainstorm, iterate, talk about things in real time, which is a lot harder than, at 10 p.m. over WeChat text or something, which is how I and most people are communicating with their suppliers. So yeah, it's really nice if you can do it.
Yeah. I guess in today's COVID world, it's probably a bit more challenging to do that, but I'm glad you had the opportunity to do that. And then we've talked a lot about your experience as a seller and an online business owner, but just to touch on, since we have you with the Quiet Light experience as well, are there any key learnings that you've seen that didn't happen in your experience, but as you've been helping other sellers and buyers through this process, things that you would advise, or like the number one thing that people don't expect, but they're seeing, like, that's separate from you, but something that you're witnessing in all of your advising?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think when you get into the exit process, Quiet Light does a really nice, one thing I hear time and time again from buyers is like, wow, it's so refreshing. You guys ask the right questions, the questions that I would want asked. Like, you take the time to put together nice materials. And I think part of that's because a lot of, all of us have lived in this world before. So we kind of have that lens of like, hey, if I was the buyer, like, what do I want to know? And we have more of that culture of like, let's not, try to, if there's a hard question and if there's difficulty, let's ask it and talk about it. But I think sellers, a big thing is this understanding, like, a lot of this is the numbers matter, and a huge thing, maybe the most important thing, but there is a softer side of things as well. So when you're filling out your seller interview and we're talking through how to answer different questions, when, we always do a Zoom interview as well. These things are really important first impressions. So make sure you're able to take the time, do a thorough job. If I'm a buyer and I see someone's just really kind of sloppy in their answers and they're kind of all over the place, like that's going to just create less confidence than someone that seems really buttoned up. They've been thoughtful about things. So I think that's one piece. There's other pieces. I mean, of course, it still happens that we talk to a lot of people that their financials and their P&L just is not in order. And I totally get it, because you're focused on running a business, and that's job one over your accounting and your books and records. But hire it out if you need to. That's so key to have clean financials. And then the other piece I'd say is like on businesses that are below, we're going to have like larger pools of capital. There's a lot of SBA buyers out there that want to use SBA financing. And as a seller, no one likes paying taxes, and a lot of people will their P&L will show one thing and the tax return will show something different, often a lot less, which might feel like a great thing at the time, but you're really shooting yourself in the foot there, because you're going to shut out all these SBA buyers because you got to have 3 years of tax returns. So just think about, like, if you're looking for an exit, down the road, just think about how you want to play that, because you're going to shut off this whole pool of potentially great buyers if your tax returns are not in line.
That's great. I mean, it wouldn't be great, but it's great to know.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Paul, this has been an awesome hour. I feel like we've gone through a ton of content and super insightful information from you. Is there anything final you'd like to add or mention about both your experience working as a quiet light advisor?
No, I mean, hopefully this is valuable. I think it's fairly broad, but if there's more specific questions anyone has, if you're a buyer, if you're a seller, like please email me. Happy to chat through your situation and try to help in any way that I can. That's kind of one of the ethos I think of Quiet Light is, we're here to help. When I went through the process, Joe helped me, like I said, 12 or 18 months ahead of my exit. So whether you're a buyer or seller or wherever you are in the journey, like I'm happy to help if I can help. So I just leave it at that.
That's great. So if you had a question, but you didn't get a chance to ask it, please, as Paul said, feel free to reach out, and he would be happy to get to those for you. We'll be sending out this recording shortly in the next day to 2 days, and take a look back at it. And if you have questions that come up after rewatching it, please feel free to shoot them our way. And I think Paul has a couple other nuggets he'll plan to send to you via email over the next week or so. So keep an eye out for those. Otherwise, it's been a great hour. Thank you all for joining us for our September AMA. We'll be back next month with a whole other slew of helpful information, a new guest speaker. Paul Andersen, thank you so much for joining. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Hey, thanks, Sam. Thanks everybody who